Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. So I'm Ann Kurzan, Dean of the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, and a professor of English and Linguistics in LSA. And I am just delighted to be with you, those of you who are here in person, and all of you who are live streaming today. My first year as the Dean, back in fall of 2019, in the before times, I took for granted that the State of the College address would always happen in person in an auditorium. And I will say that this year, I am not taking for granted at all that you all are here in person. And I'm just delighted that we are also live streaming so that others can join us and have that access. Here in LSA, we are committed to coming out of this awful pandemic, doing things better every way that we can in line with our values and our mission. So before I continue, I want to acknowledge that the University of Michigan is located on the territory of the Anishinaabe people. In 1817, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations made the largest single land transfer to the University of Michigan, seated in the treaty at the foot of the rapids so that their children could be educated. We acknowledge the history of Native displacement that allowed the University of Michigan to be founded. Today, we reaffirm contemporary and ancestral Anishinaabeg ties to the land and their profound contributions to this institution. I also want to note an important tool for accessibility. Today, as part of our live stream for this event, we have live captioning. So if you're watching this remotely, you should be able to turn on the captions on your browser. And if you're here in person, you can visit this web address where you can follow along on captions on your phone if you would like to do so. I also think it's helpful for everyone to know what lies ahead. I have timed this address. It's just about 45 minutes. I always think it's nice to know, how long am I going to be sitting here? It's longer if you laugh, but don't let that stop you. And then we will have time for questions and comments, and I hope that you will ask questions if you have questions. And then we will have a reception, and you can see we're set up for the reception in the back. So last week, Isabel Wilkerson was here on campus. She's the author of Warmth of Other Suns and Caste. And she was here on campus and gave a very inspiring talk over at Hill Auditorium. And as I prepped to meet her, I came across a much quoted quote, and it is much quoted for reason, which came from a commencement address that she gave at Bates College in 2014. And she said, "You must leave this world a better place than it would have been if you had not existed." And I love the profound simplicity of the challenge. You must leave this world a better place than it would have been if you had not existed. Then the next morning, I was walking into work and listening to National Public Radio, as I am wont to do. And there was a story about the dire challenges that the Colorado River is facing. Drought, climate change, and overuse have shrunk the mighty Colorado River in some places to a trickle. I have to say the story felt almost overwhelming in its scope and its impact. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I hear a story like this, my first reaction is I want to hide under the bed. It is so much. But the story went on, and it described a host of scientists and activists and ordinary citizens working to confront this problem and solve it. There's a desalination plant that is making ocean water drinkable. They're working on getting rid of lawns, capturing stormwater, recycling wastewater, and fallowing some of the agriculture. And I found myself filled with gratitude to the researchers, including so many of our researchers here on campus in LSA who have spent years, even decades, entire careers working on the science and on the policy issues, and who are ready with the answers and with possible solutions when the world raises urgent questions and is ready to listen. So I try to list 2 to 3 things every day that I'm grateful for as part of a well-being practice. And I found myself at that moment thinking about the work that is happening in every corner of the college, where faculty and staff and postdocs and students are setting their sights on a challenge, on a really hard thing, and devoting themselves to it. They are saying, I will take this one. And what I hope you know is that other people look at you and think, oh, I'm so glad you have that one. I'll take this one. It's another way to think about our theme, and here we have the Colorado River, to think of our theme of LSA meets the moment. So meeting the moment is addressing and being ready to address the most pressing problems, from the most local, how do we make this college or this unit within the college a better, more diverse, equitable, inclusive, accessible place than it would be if I had not existed, to the most global, how do I help this world become more just, more sustainable because I was here. What I see in the LSA community is members saying through their actions, I will leverage my expertise, my talents, my time and energies, and try and make this thing, whatever that thing is, better for the common good. And the breadth of expertise in LSA means that we can bring all of that to bear on complex problems in a way that no other college at the university is able to do. That is the breadth of who we are. This is our historians studying fascism when it is not fashionable to study fascism. It's our classicists figuring out how history needs to be retold to reveal a more diverse range of contributions and explanations. It's our sociologists studying the nature of work, and our HR professionals being ready to support our teams in the middle of a pandemic. It's psychologists studying mindfulness and its effects, and the team at the Barger Leadership Institute implementing those insights as part of leadership development for undergraduates. It's physicists unlocking the physics of high temperature superconductors. It's also the technology services team and the advisors in student academic affairs partnering to create a secure online chat function for advising to support thousands of undergraduates in the college. What I get to see from my vantage point, given what I'm responsible for right now in my role, is that vast depth and breadth of expertise in the college and the value of our collaboration and teamwork as we come at these problems that make us able to meet this moment and be prepared for many more moments to come. And I will say I think this is a really promising and important moment for this university. We are just a couple of weeks away from welcoming our next president of the university, Dr. Santa Ono. I also want to express my gratitude to President Mary Sue Coleman, who has stepped in and been a graceful and steady leader at this moment in the university's history. It's also a moment where we are getting ready to launch the next university-wide capital campaign. So this is an important moment for the university. And as I was preparing for this State of the College address, I decided to mix things up a little bit. And this year, we actually asked chairs and directors and CAs and other administrative leaders to share a couple of things. One is, what would they like to see celebrated at the State of the College? And the other was, what would the community actually like to hear me talk about in the State of the College? So I realized that for 3 years, I've just been guessing about what you would like to hear about in the State of the College, so it seemed like a good idea to ask. And it was, and we will continue to do this. So let's start with what colleagues wanted to see celebrated. And I have to say, there are so many. It was a joy to have them come in that I can only fit a small fraction of them here, but we will find other ways to feature many of these highlights in the weeks and months to come. In terms of celebrating each other, I'm also going to suggest a possible action that each of you can take. Either later today or tomorrow, drop an email or a handwritten note to a colleague, to a team member, to a student, to let them know that you think they're doing outstanding work, that they are seen and that they are appreciated. It can make such a difference, and it's a thing that each of us can do. So in terms of celebrating our community, I'm going to start with celebrating students. It's incredibly hard to pick from the inspiring stories of students who are striving to make the world better for their presence. Both are remarkable graduate students and undergraduate students. I've decided this year to focus on 5 undergraduate students and the projects that they are working on, including Rachel Merritt, who majored in Russian language and international studies, and she's using the Rhodes Scholarship to help defend democracy and create more just information ecosystems. Karthik Ravi is headed to the University of Cambridge to continue his work on brain tumors. And I wrote to him to say, I'm going to feature you in the State of the College. And he said, I'm very honored. My time at LSA has been very formative and joyous. And I love that that is a student who's also been studying through the pandemic here. Chloe Hale is in Rwanda as I speak to investigate the relationship between school closures, teenage pregnancies, and young women's rights in the country. Emmanuel Orozco Castellanos spent last spring working in Europe with an organization called Asylum Connect. It's a nonprofit organization that helps LGBTQ+ asylum seekers. And then I also had the opportunity to meet Selma Palomino, a senior studying political science and Latino studies, when she was selected as a Truman Scholar, because what the Truman Scholar organization asked us to do is surprise the student with the news that they have been selected. And as you can imagine, surprise, it's the dean. It's a slightly terrifying surprise, but it was wonderful to get to meet her, to get to share this news. Here is a student who is the first in her family to graduate from a 4-year university, who wants to dedicate herself to voting rights advocacy through studying public policy. I then also have to add that this year, 6 University of Michigan students won Obama Chesky Voyager Awards. These are given to rising juniors on a path to public service. And as the Dean of LSA, I just want to say 5 of the 6 are in LSA. So then celebrating some of our many, many remarkable faculty. In past years, I have sometimes featured assistant professors. This year, I am featuring 4 full professors in the college, starting with Professor Vincent Hutchings in political science and the Department of Afro-American and African Studies. He was elected to the National Academy of Sciences for his field-leading research in Black politics, American public opinion and voting behavior, and racial attitudes. And I will say that given his expertise and stature, Professor Hutchings is, as you can imagine, in high demand, especially in election season. But I will say that when I email him and say things like, could you serve on a panel to talk about the election for our LSA community? He responds immediately, and the answer is yes. Professor Heather Ann Thompson in the Residential College, Department of Afro-American and African Studies and History. And as some of you may have seen, there was an article in the New York Times. She has sued the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervisions for banning her remarkable book on the Attica Uprising. And in the process, she is highlighting the incredibly important issue of the banning and censoring of books in prisons. Professor Mark Newman in Physics and Complex Systems, who has tackled deeply challenging scientific issues through the study of network systems. And this year, he was elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society, joining the likes of Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin. And then Professor Lisa Harris in Women's and Gender Studies and Michigan Medicine. She's also the director of the Health Sciences Scholars Program, who is using her deep expertise to help us as a university community understand the implications of the Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court, which I will say takes courage at this moment of deep and sometimes violent divisions in our country. One of the many things that I'm proud of in LSA is that we are such a research powerhouse with a deep commitment to undergraduate teaching alongside graduate mentoring. I enjoy every glimpse that I get of all the teaching that's happening in the college, and I do want to thank everyone who's been teaching for the past 2+ years during this pandemic and all the creativity and flexibility and hard work you've put in to get us through this. And I was thinking about these little glimpses I get them when I meet undergraduates, and one of the questions I always ask is, what is one of the most interesting things you're learning in your classes right now? And they'll tell me something fascinating, and I think, I want to go sit in on that class. And I was thinking about it yesterday when I was walking, there's a little theme here, and walking around campus, but I was walking and I ran into Naomi Silver, a longtime faculty member in the Sweetland Center for Writing. And this semester, she's teaching the new course, Writing 160, Multimodal Composition, Artful Politics. And she was telling me about how, as part of this course, students are going to be analyzing a race in this election in their home district. And I thought, what a brilliant way to encourage civic engagement and critical analytic skills at this moment during an election year. Of course, as we celebrate the faculty, I will also mention that we have 5 Guggenheim winners, 5, 1 Mellon New Directions Fellowship, 1 Sloan, and 3 ACLS fellowships. And then I also want to note that the Museum of Anthropological Archaeology, starting tonight, is celebrating its first 100 years, looking ahead to the many, many years to come. Then I want to turn to celebrating staff colleagues. I'm going to start with the undergraduate ed events team led by Shannon Davis, who has been organizing the LSA at Play events since last fall. I want you to imagine that the dean says to you, let's host a picnic for 18,000 undergraduates. And Shannon acts like this is a completely reasonable request. And she and her team have hosted amazing events for undergraduates all of last year. We're well underway this year. And then we have expanded their portfolio so that they organized, for example, the ice cream social for staff yesterday, and it was wonderful to see so many of you there. I also want to recognize the team in the dean's office and in advancement. All of these teams have hosted events for thousands of students, for staff, for postdocs and faculty, and have through this helped us continue to try to rebuild community and reconnect as we come back together. If you have not been to the new Central Campus classroom building, I urge you to go. It is not only stunning, and it really is stunning as a learning space, but it's also designed to be inclusive and accessible, from the technology to inclusive facilities. This is a testament to the visionary work of a whole team of people, including from LSA facilities and tech services, and I want to do a special shout out here to Moni Dressler and to Susan Monroe, who have been leading on this incredible project. And so many thanks to them and to the whole teams who've helped design and now continue to support this remarkable classroom building. And as my third example, I want to tell you about our colleagues in student academic affairs who are revisiting what it means to put students on academic probation. And I want to pause on this one because I think it says a lot about the work we're doing in LSA to dismantle barriers to inclusion and equity. First, once you think about the carceral language of putting students on academic probation, you realize that we need to do this differently. Then there are studies about the negative consequences, When we do this, when we take a student who has, for example, a 1.99 GPA and say to them, even if we don't mean to, that they are in trouble, but not the student with the 2.01 GPA. We know this has negative consequences. There have been studies to show us. And the question is, what does it mean when instead we wrap our arms around a struggling student? We know that, for example, the first year of college does not impact all students equally. It is shaped by where you went to high school, whether your parents went to college, whether you feel like you belong here, given the realities of the fact that we're a predominantly white institution, whether you're having to navigate negative stereotypes in the field that you're choosing to study, and the list goes on. So I'm proud that we're revisiting this as a college to think about how we want to do this. And as we revisit this practice in our college, I'm reminded of the conversation with Isabel Wilkerson last week, where she emphasized that we need to think about all of the talent that is not realized, all of the talent that's not realized because of the impact of history and its legacy of structural inequalities and racism. That we must be willing to invest in people and in their talents. We must beware of the myth of rugged individualism and be prepared to invest in people so that they can succeed. And I will say, this reminds me of one of my favorite linguistic facts. So this fact is about the expression to pull oneself up by one's bootstraps. At this point, this is now used to encapsulate, in many ways, the American dream, which is that if you work really hard, you can succeed all on your own. That no matter where you start, no matter your circumstances, the history of your community, the history of this country, work hard and you will succeed. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, that expression came into the English language in the middle of the 19th century. And when it came into the language, here's what it meant: to try to do the impossible. Because in fact, if you think about it, if you have a little strap on the back of your boot and you try to pull yourself up with that, it is impossible. And there are quotes in the middle of the 19th century that say, to try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps is like trying to put yourself in a wheelbarrow and wheel yourself around. So, what an interesting linguistic fact, especially given that we know it's not a level playing field for students or for anyone else. So many people across LSA are trying to make the college and the world better by seriously addressing equity and inclusion through looking hard at systems, the way this team in Student Academic Affairs is doing, and seeing what they can do from where they are to make our community more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So DEI work and anti-racism work, this is incredibly challenging and it's ongoing. There are no quick fixes here, but there is a lot we can do, must do, and are doing to make a difference each and every year. So I know that some members in our community wonder if for all the language about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, over the past 6 years, we have accomplished as much as we'd hoped. It's an important question, and it's one that came up when I asked what questions would people like me to talk about. They said, what has actually happened as part of DEI 1.0? And I will say it is actually a very inspiring list, which reflects hard work by a lot of people. I say that not to say that we don't have a lot of work to go, but it is really important to acknowledge what we have done. So I want to take a few minutes to acknowledge the achievements of the first 5 years of the DEI plan, which wrapped up this year, and we've done an evaluation over the last year. I can't be fully comprehensive here, but it will be available, the summary will be available on our website. So in terms of increasing access to higher education and recruiting faculty with DEI expertise, I'm gonna start here. We have launched the LSA Collegiate Fellows Program, and that will have brought 50 outstanding fellows to LSA by the end of this year. The Kessler Presidential Scholars Program, with wraparound support for first-generation low-income undergraduate students, is now endowed in perpetuity. And it is a national model, including for how to start to close the graduation gap for first-generation students. The LSA Laptop Program became a university-wide program, and we have hosted successful preview weekends for graduate students all across the college. We've also sought to address some systemic policies. We have been implementing recommendations from the Anti-Racism Task Force, including hiring our first ever Chief People Officer, Carla Renee Williams, reviewing our admissions criteria and working with the Office for Enrollment Management to address barriers to access for undergraduates, and with expert guidance, revisiting aspects of the race and ethnicity requirement. We've also been implementing recommendations from the Working Group on Preventing Sexual and Gender-Based Harassment, including providing a semester of funding for graduate students who are supported by grant funds and need to change advisors or labs, creating respectful, inclusive environments and affirmative responsibility for all leaders, updating criteria for awards in the college, and revisiting curricula for staff orientations. We are also continuing our pilot of requiring diversity statements for all tenure-track faculty members. To support DEI knowledge and implementation, we have an incredible DEI team in the college, which are listed on this slide, with a network of inclusive culture liaisons throughout the college. We have an inclusive teaching website, and we have DEI workshops and certificates, and several teams collaborated to create the LSA DEI website, where we make all of the reports we have publicly available. We want to be as transparent as we can be and accountable. So it's really important to me to highlight this work because it is so challenging, requiring an enormous amount of effort from colleagues all across the college, and it is essential to our excellence as a college. So now, questions from you. So we got several other great questions, and I can't address all of them, but I'm going to highlight two big ones that came up a couple of times. So the first is, what is the future of flexible work in LSA? And I will say this is probably the most frequent question that came in, understandably. So I completely understand why many people across the college have asked about our future commitment to flexible work. There's a concern, I think, that the flexible work that we have adopted to get through the pandemic and here as we emerge from the pandemic will go away, and that we will go back to doing things as we did in the before times. So let me start by saying very clearly that we are not going back. We're going forward to build on what we have learned through the last 2.5 years. And one of those lessons is that for our effectiveness and well-being, we benefit from a more flexible workplace. So I'm committed to being as flexible as possible with our work practices, knowing, and this is important, that flexible means different things for different teams and different individuals on those teams. For some, it involves some remote work. For others, it's about schedules because they cannot do their work remotely. Faculty have long had more flexibility in their schedules than most staff colleagues, which I know comes as news to no one in this room. And helping everyone have more flexibility is an important step for us as a college. I'm also committed to the University of Michigan's identity as a residential campus. And I believe that having a substantial amount of our work in person, face-to-face, is also critically important to our effectiveness and well-being. So this year we are continuing an interim policy, which I know has caused concern for some, but this is because creating policies that balance the twin values of flexibility and face-to-face engagement is complicated. And we want to get it right. We need more time to understand what is working and what is not working as well, so that we, especially now that we have more people on campus every day. So we're going to take this year to keep looking for this balance, and we'll come to you all for input and feedback about what's working, what isn't working, about how it's going, and we'll evaluate after this academic year, and that our goal is to have a long-term policy in place as we start the next academic year. So I wanted to give you that update on that question. So the next question was, how do we continue to achieve excellence within constraints? So I have to say, I love this question, and it really was a question. This is not a setup. How is she going to talk about the budget? So this was actually a question that came in. And what I really like about it is that in many ways, it's always the question. We never have unlimited resources, and so we're always having to be strategic as we set priorities in the college. Here is the wisest thing that anyone has ever said to me about budgets. Budgets are fundamentally philosophical documents. This is why it was so important that 3 years ago we clearly articulated our mission, our vision, our values so that they could guide us through the pandemic and guide us as we try to create strategic budgetary priorities. So keeping that in mind, let me start in responding to this question with some basic information about the budget. Because it's part of the constraint, it's also part of the opportunities for investment in excellence. So the first slide here, operating revenue. Where does our money come from? So you will see here a key number at the top is $1.0 billion. I have never seen that on an LSA slide before in reference to the revenue. This is a first for us. So last year it's up from $968 million last year. You will see that the biggest slice of our revenue is the general fund, and we'll turn to that shortly. I do want to note here that our research grant revenue, sponsored funds in the graph, has gone up from $101 million in the last fiscal year to $106 million. And our volume of research, VOR, increased just over 6% to $212 million. But I do want to recognize, I mean, those are really nice numbers. I also want to recognize how very difficult it has been to do research and write grant proposals for the last 2.5 years. And so I say that both to celebrate, but I also, as part of that, want to recognize that we have colleagues who have been unable to do their research, unable to spend down research funds because they couldn't do the research that they want to do. So they're important numbers for us through a very, very challenging time for everyone who's been trying to do research, and to reassure people that we will account for that as people are going through faculty reviews. So then let me turn, given this, to the general fund. So here is the general fund, which is the biggest piece of that revenue pie. And here we see a total revenue of $830 million. And as is always true for LSA, the great majority comes from undergraduate tuition. So you will see almost 75% of the general funds come from undergraduate tuition. If you add graduate student tuition, this comes to almost 85%. And I will say that whenever I think about how much of our revenue comes from student tuition that they are paying for themselves or their families are paying, I feel the depth of our responsibility to use these funds with the utmost responsibility to support our mission. So then the next slide is, where do these funds go? So this is our operating expenses. A very important number here is $994 million. Now, this is not high-level math to know that that is less than $1 billion. And that is important. So we have a surplus this year of just about $6 million, and we always want to have a surplus in the college. And this is really important for us. We save this so that we can invest in, for example, large capital projects like renovating the chemistry building or renovating Lorch. So those are hundreds of millions of dollars to do those projects, and so we need to save to be ready to do some of those for the excellence of the college. So one thing I would like to also note here is that nearly half of our expenses in the college go to paying salaries and benefits of faculty and staff. That is, it's for people. And this is something that I'm really proud of. It matters. It's aligned with our values. The excellence of the college is about the people in the college. And so I think this slide speaks to our values and our philosophy about where that money is going. The college is all about the people in it. So what is the financial state of the college? Currently, we are in great shape, especially relative to many other institutions of higher education. As you've seen on these slides, this is an amazing amount of revenue for us to be able to invest in the college. Our budget and finance teams have done extraordinary, thoughtful work with our budget in the face of a wide range of challenges, including a pandemic. And because of their efforts, the college is currently on very, very solid financial ground. But there's another reality here that we have to account for, and it is on this graph. We need to account for a structural deficit that is right in front of us. And it is enough in front of us that even I, without my glasses, and I will say for those of you in the back row, can't totally tell who you are because I do not have my glasses on, but it's right here. Even I can see it without my glasses on. So this chart is a projection through 2038 of the college's revenues, the blue line, that's the one at the bottom, and our expenses, the orangish red line at the top, if we do not change anything. And that's an important thing, if we don't change anything. This is a structural deficit. It arises when costs rise in ways that cannot and should not be met by just raising tuition, for example. We've known this was coming. Many of you who've been here a long time have heard about this for years. And we are partnering with the Provost's office on structural solutions because this takes structural solutions. And the Provost's office has been a wonderful partner with us as we work on that. But it is important, first of all, I want to be transparent with all of you that this is here and we are working on it. And to recognize that this means we need to be very fiscally responsible. So this needs to be part of our planning. So we're in very good shape. We must plan for imminent structural deficit, which means both thinking about other avenues for revenue and being fiscally responsible. We are also in the position that we get to and must continue to plan for major strategic investments. It is essential to the excellence of the college. So when I talk about fiscal responsibility, I really mean this at every level. And I want to just give you one example. For example, we discovered that the tenure-track tenured faculty had grown 18% between 2008 and 2018. Some of that growth was strategic growth, and some of it was unregulated growth. And so we have told, and many of you know we've told all the chairs and directors, and they've been talking with their faculty, that we will be contracting the size of the tenure-track faculty by about 5% over the next 5 to 10 years. What this really means is that we will be hiring at a slightly slower pace over the next 5 to 10 years. This will still leave our tenure-track faculty bigger than it was in 2012. And for those of us who've been here a long time, we were in an excellent place in 2012. And this is a slight contraction. It brings us back, again, bigger than we were in 2012. I want to emphasize this does not affect assistant professors who do not yet have tenure. So we hire remarkable assistant professors. They are on budgeted lines, and we are invested in tenuring them here. This is about slightly slower hiring over the next 5 to 10 years. Many of you know we are also having to say no to most requests for new staff positions on general funds, which I know can be frustrating. And I know that many of you over the last couple of years have had to stretch and work, as we've had to get through this pandemic, additional jobs a little bit outside of your scope or way outside of your scope to help out, and that we have seen the effects of the Great Resignation as well, and people have had to step in and help. But we're in a moment where we can keep investing in excellence, but we're not in a moment where we can keep growing as a college. And I want to say that excellence and growth are not synonymous. But this is something that we need to be thinking about. And one of the things I will continue to ask us to do is to always think about what we might stop doing to make space in every sense for all the new initiatives that we are excited about and that we want to take on. So it's something that all of us just need to think about, is how do we make space for all that is exciting and new? So now let me turn to strategic investments. So what I want to say here is that excellence lives in the units. All of you who are here in this room, who are watching on live stream, are the reason that LSA is a world-class institution. Much of my job as the dean is to facilitate your ability to do the extraordinary things that you do. The units, and here I include not only the academic units, but also dean's office teams like the Noonan Advising Center, LSA Recruitment and Scholarships, Opportunity Hub, the Comprehensive Studies Program, and the administrative teams. It's in your units that the work of the college gets done. You are carrying out our research and our teaching missions. So our main strategy here is to make thoughtful investments in transformational work that you are doing. So here are some examples of new investments in the college. The Meet the Moment research grants. We provided 4 research teams, interdisciplinary research teams in the college with over $4 million in funding to support high impact exploration for the public good. These projects are addressing microplastics, climate change, and mass incarceration. We have a new quantum initiative in collaboration with the College of Engineering and with support from the provost. The new program in computing for arts and sciences, PCAS, is designed to meet the incredible demand among students for computing skills, but through a liberal arts approach, one that considers the human and social impacts of the digital. We're trying to make sure that our business offices and research administrators can provide the level of support that faculty are seeking for their research. We are investing in work and learning spaces, such as the Angel Hall living room. And as many of you know, I'm in the English department, so I'm on the 3rd floor of Angel Hall, and one of my colleagues in the English department, a couple weeks after the Angel Hall living room was transformed into a friendly, cozy student space, they emailed me and they said, sometimes you don't know there is a problem until you see the solution. So we've invested there. We have been working on improving the basement classrooms in MLB. And by the end of this year, we will have gender-inclusive restrooms in all LSA buildings. We've been investing in DEI programs and staff. And I will say that until I came into the dean's office, I didn't have the perspective of all the different kinds of investments that are involved in furthering the excellence of the college. I was living a little bit in my bubble as a professor of English and linguistics and an administrator in the English department, and what did I need to get done what I needed to get done? And in this role, to step back and think about what are all of those investments? It's people, it's spaces, and then it's all the things that people need to be able to thrive in their work and workplaces, in their studies, and in the environments in which they learn. And I recognize that some of the investment is within the dean's office units, such as research administration and undergraduate education. It brings me to our commitment that people shouldn't have to try to thrive here without support. We know what pulling yourself up by your bootstraps used to mean, asking people to try the impossible. And we have chosen to focus instead on equity and inclusion and access. And over the past couple of decades, expectations have shifted, I think in good and important ways, for what the college, in addition to departments and other academic units, should provide in order to help students and others thrive. So, as I talk about investment, I need to observe here the importance of philanthropy to the college. We in LSA are fortunate to have incredibly generous alumni and friends who support us with donations of time and money, and we have one of the most talented fundraising teams in higher education. Our advancement office, led by Martha Luckham, worked with donors who last year gave or pledged more than $100 million to LSA. The goal was $50 million. Most of these funds support undergraduate students with financial need, which will always be a top priority. And they're also distributed across the college, from strategic funds in departments to professorships and graduate fellowships to our museums to initiatives like Optimize and the Opportunity Hub. At a time when state funds continue to lag far below what they used to be, philanthropy is a lifeline and a difference maker for LSA. I quickly want to address one question that does come up. How could LSA be facing constraints given the size of the college endowment? It's a fair question. So the endowment is just about $1.8 billion. And this comes from the millions of dollars that our donors have invested in the college. This gives us about $54 million a year in distributions. Much of that is designated for specific purposes: scholarships, endowed professorships, lecture series in departments, strategic funds for departments. Some of it is discretionary. And along with chairs and directors, I as the dean, I'm always thinking about how to make strategic decisions about how to invest that money in excellence. So for example, I use some of those funds to invest in the Meet the Moment grants. I'm using some of those funds to pilot 2 student mental health and wellness advocates in the college so that we can systematically enhance our support for students and partner with the health initiatives at the university level, which I think will get a real boost when Santa Ono comes in as the next president. Some of you asked in the questions how we're addressing student mental health and wellness. And while there is much to do, these new positions, I think, are a key step. So now let me look ahead. And I will try to do this relatively quickly. We're in the home stretch of the college address, and so it's a chance to look ahead. So first, DEI Strategic Planning 2.0. So we're preparing for this, and we are delighted that Professor Isis Settles has stepped in as the new Associate Dean for DEI and will be working in partnership with Carla Renee Williams and Jessica Garsha and many others in this work. In every area of action, at every level of the college, we need to be thinking about DEI and anti-racism. This work will be fundamental to our success in the years ahead. And we have much to do, which I hope will feel galvanizing. So given the size and complexity of LSA, a key part of this next phase in DEI work will be supporting units across the college in goal setting and implementation, and making sure that we are holding ourselves across the college accountable for the work of making this college more diverse, accessible, inclusive, and equitable. So we'll continue to implement some of the recommendations coming out of the Anti-Racism Task Force and the Preventing Sexual and Gender-Based Harassment Working Group. I see this as a key responsibility of the dean. These task forces have put together expert reports, and my job is to make sure we keep moving forward on the recommendations. We'll continue to use a DEI lens to see what we need to change in how we hire faculty and staff, how we promote, how we tenure, how we provide professional development opportunities, how we make invisible work more visible, and I will put it in scare quotes because invisible work is not invisible to the people who do it and the people who benefit from it. So we will continue to use a DEI lens to look at how we teach in ever more inclusive ways, how we support everyone once they are here, and the list goes on. It takes all of us to do this work, and I know that members of our community will, as they always do, step up to the challenges and say, I'll take this one. So we, in our strategic planning process, identified 4 areas of action for us as a college. The recent LSA Carbon Neutrality Task Force asked us to think about whether we would add sustainability as either an additional value or an additional area for action, and I think that is important for us to be thinking about. So I want to look at these 4 as we look ahead. So encouraging genuine academic exploration. We do this every day for students in programs like the historically groundbreaking program Europe. I've mentioned the new program in computing and arts and sciences, which launched its first classes this fall. The Optimize program is continuing to allow students to explore entrepreneurship in a liberal arts context, and we're excited to see what that could look like in the curriculum. And the LSA Opportunity Hub is fundamentally designed to foster exploration so that students feel like they can explore this college and major in what they love and what excites them and get connected to what comes next. And the hub is now able to host employers and connect students with alums, so we can say that if you are an LSA student, you truly do have access to our networks. We will also continue to experiment with online and blended classes as we think about the future of education in the college. So addressing pressing societal problems, again, our researchers are doing this all across the college every day. They're doing it in centers like the Center for Social Solutions, the Research for Indigenous Social Action and Equity Center, and the DISCO Network, which is imagining an equitable digital future. I've mentioned the Meet the Moment grants, and so let me just talk briefly about the Sustainability Task Force report. It is a brilliant report by a team of experts in the college. I want to say that LSA has already met the campus-wide goal of a 25% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. But there is much more to do. We are in the process of and have a plan for replacing all the bulbs in LSA buildings with LED technology, and we have engaged studies for what it would mean to take 2 of our facilities carbon neutral, and I am planning for how we can make that investment. So much more to follow on that, but I wanted to give you an update there. We are leading in systemic change. I know that LSA community members are dismantling barriers to access and inclusion in every corner. We have hired our 2 new disability navigators who are doing invaluable work for us in the college. In undergraduate education, we continue to expand initiatives to make LSA more accessible and welcoming to transfer students, especially those from community colleges, which is core mission work for us. We're leading the Kessler Scholars Collaborative to expand support for first-generation students, and there's ongoing work coming out of the Anti-Racism Task Force and the Preventing Sexual and Gender-Based Harassment Task Force. And then fostering a culture of purpose and well-being. We will continue to invest in LSA at Play and other ways to build community. As I mentioned, this year we'll be seeking more input and evaluating our interim flex work policy as part of our commitment to balance and maximizing time for the work that matters. We will be focusing on professional development paths and opportunities for staff, and I mentioned the 2 new student mental health and wellness advocates. Please know that this is just a snapshot of all that is happening in the college. In our office, we have a chart with swim lanes, which is not an accident because I am a swimmer. And it is how we track progress and all the initiatives that are centered within the college. And I know that you all are tracking at every level. So before I close, I want to share some thanks for this address. I want to thank everybody on the leadership team who helped with data, John Lofi and his talented team who created the slides, colleagues in tech services who made all the technology work, and a special shout out to Marciel and Andy who are here, colleagues in facilities who set up this room, colleagues in the dean's office who coordinated many logistics and who've put together the reception for us. So closing thoughts. I started with words from a commencement address, and I actually am going to end with words from a different commencement address. This one by a graduate of our own Helen Zell Writers Program, Jessamine Ward. I came across this because I was reading, she has this new book, Navigate Your Stars, which it comes from her commencement address at Tulane in 2018, and it's an affirmation for why we persist in doing all the important work. So she writes, "Success is not the result of making one good choice, of taking one step. Real success requires step after step after step after step. It requires choice after choice. It demands education and passion and commitment and persistence and hunger and patience. And not the easy hunger, like the hunger for sweets that plagued me so when I was young, for instant success, for a lifetime of reward after 4 years of effort. Sometimes this kind of success does happen for young people. For many others, success comes after hundreds of hours of work and lucky breaks and study and heartbreak and loss and wandering. As an adult, I learned this: persist, work hard, face rejection, weather the setbacks until you meet the gatekeeper who will open a door for you. Sometimes you are 20 when you stumble upon an open doorway. Sometimes you are 30, sometimes you are 40 or 50 or 60. I remembered this when I felt like giving up. May we persist in this incredibly important work that we're doing in LSA. May we be hungry for the change that each one of us can pursue to make the world and the college the way it should be. May we also strive to be the ones who open the gates ever wider and invest in the talents of those we welcome to our community as faculty and staff and postdocs and graduate students and undergraduate students. I am deeply honored to work alongside all of you. Because of you, the state of the college is strong. Thank you for all that you do in support of the mission of this remarkable college. So thank you. And I see that I ran long, sorry about that, but I would love to get questions or comments. And we have, Brittany and Alexa have microphones so that we'll be able to hear you. Great. We've got one question up here. Sylvia Pedraza's got one, but just hang on one second. So we want people on the live stream to be able to hear.
Sylvia Pedraza, Sociology and American Culture. I just wondered, in some of the graphs that you showed us with numbers, because I was raised on numbers, that it said that indirect costs were a certain percentage coming in and indirect costs were a certain percentage going out, and it was about the same, and I don't know exactly what that is.
Okay, and this, I may need a little help on the graph here from, I'm gonna run this over to Steve. This is the joy of having members of the team in the house. So he can explain what we have captured on the graph, but thank you for the question.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear that, are you asking what the indirect costs are, what indirect costs are?
What are they? And the second is how can they coming in and going out be roughly the
Same. Okay, so indirect costs are the, basically the overhead money we get from the government on grants, right? So we get a $10,000 grant in and they give us $500 to help pay for the overhead, which we consider indirect costs. That money then comes into the college, but then we disperse about 80%, 81% back out to the units then, who decide how they then disperse it. Sometimes it helps pay for startup packages, sometimes it goes to individual faculty members, but it's less led up to the individual department to decide. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So Gus.
Hi, and first I would want to thank you for your kind and compassionate leadership during the pandemic, because it was... Brownie points aside, I was struck by the language about academic probation and the carceral nature of that. What about the language of divisions within the college, natural science and social science?
Oh, what an interesting question. I love that, of course, as a linguist, too, of sort of what does it mean to talk about the divisions? Because fundamentally, it's a way to organize ourselves. And what's one of the interesting things about LSA and powerful things about LSA is that we have all of these divisions, natural sciences, social sciences, and humanities, under one big tent. And many other universities are organized differently, where you may have 3 separate colleges with 3 separate deans, or 2 of them combined and 1 of them separate. But one of the things that it does allow us to do is really embrace the interdisciplinary work that we do all across the college. And I have always felt like LSA is a place that walks the walk on interdisciplinarity, that while we talk about divisions, we happily move across them as if they were not there. So I love the question in terms of thinking about why do we use that language as opposed to, right, that's what I was just thinking about, groups, teams. So I really appreciate the question. I will say I had never thought about the word until you just said it, and then I thought that is a really interesting way to slice it up as opposed to what it really is, which is an organizing principle of the college that helps us make sense of particular kinds of disciplinary expertise. So I will be thinking about that.
Hello, I'm Catherine Badgley, Residential College in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. I appreciated your land acknowledgement at the beginning, and I'm wondering, what does LS&A do by way of honoring a commitment to Indigenous students?
I will say I think that there is much more that we need to do in this space as a university, as a college. It's for students. It's also, honestly, still adequately recognizing our past as an institution, that the land acknowledgement is one first step in this. One of the things, we know that there are many universities who are trying to figure this out in terms of what they might be able to offer in terms of tuition, free tuition, or that sort of thing. One of the things that our team in recruitment and scholarships is working to do is connect with all of the community colleges in the state and the tribal colleges in the state. Now, this is work we need to do with enormous sensitivity and care as an institution, especially given our history. So, but I would really like to see LSA and the university in partnership, where more Native American, more Indigenous students feel welcomed here, and that we are supporting students here. And Stephanie Freiberg at RISE is working incredibly hard on this question and has been a real thought partner for me and others around the work that it would take to make this institution more welcoming for Indigenous Native American students. Including the question of our focus on individual achievement versus collective achievement, right? Things that sometimes people can get naturalized in a community for how we think about what we reward, and to think about our emphasis on the individual and not on the collective sometimes. So much more work to be done. Thank you for the question.
Hi, I'm Emily from IGR, and what resonated with me was when you were speaking about student wellness, and that made me think about how students, with different identities, as they travel throughout campus, they experience and they see and they have different experiences depending on what identities you have, whether it's minority or the advantaged group. So my question to you, as a facilitator to a facilitator, and someone with a bird-eye view, what do you think are individual actions that we can do to make sure everyone is heard, seen, and valued, that you've seen work throughout the pandemic, maybe even before the pandemic, and something we can incorporate now?
Mm-hmm. Again, these are great questions. Thank you for the question and the focus on our student experiences across the college and how those differ based on the identities of students. You know, there's much that I know that our teams are trying to do. It depends on the different spaces that we inhabit and the work that we are doing. So I think of one thing around the work we're doing around inclusive teaching and how do we create classrooms where a diverse range of students can thrive in the classroom. I know that our Carla Renee Williams has come in to think with staff about how we can create more inclusive, equitable workspaces in which we work. I will say it's one of the reasons also that we are hiring these 2 new student mental health and wellness advocates, because this is something that I think a lot of us worry about a lot, myself included, and we need people for whom this is their entire portfolio. And one of the things we want to do is be thinking about how we get out ahead of this. So one of the things I will often hear is we need more CAPS counselors, which is true, right? We need more CAPS counselors. But we also need to work on creating an environment that is healthier for students and where we can be supporting students earlier before students feel like they are in crisis. And so one of the things we'll be asking these new student mental health and wellness advocates to do is to help us think about exactly your question. What can each of us be doing in our space, given our qualifications, to help students be healthier and thrive here? And the answer will be different for each of us, I think. But right now, I think many of us with that question don't know where to go to say, how can I be helpful? What can I do? So part of it will be how can they provide trainings and education for those of us in the college so that we can better support students. And I also, with that, also want to acknowledge the mental health and wellness of staff and faculty, postdocs, graduate students, of everybody. This has been an enormous strain on everyone, and I want to make sure that many of us, for very good reason, are very focused on student mental health and wellness, but to know that all of your health and wellness is very much on our radars, recognizing what we have been through. So we have time for another 1 or 2 if people have any other questions. All right, well, seeing none, I want to thank you again for being here, for all of you on live stream who joined us, and for those of you who are here, or those of you who on live stream who are close to here and would like to come on over. What I can see is that the food is out. And so I hope that you will stay and connect with each other and enjoy this wonderful reception. So again, thank you for all that you do, and may you enjoy the rest of your Thursday.